Discover the advantage of unlimited access to all the stories and resources from IBJ and inside Indiana business. From insights to inspiration, business leaders rely on the IBJ for all things Indiana business. Start your $1 a week trial now at ibj.com/trial offer.
Kristen, Dane. I know this is not a fresh point that I'm making because I brought it up last year at this exact spooky time. But how in the world, as a society, did we get to a place in which there are like 25-foot skeletons as yard decor in the suburbs? Hello, everyone. I'm Peter Dunn, Pete the Planner. Special episode of the Pete the Planner Show today. You know, for years, starting in 2009, I hosted a radio program. Various times I would have special guests or co-hosts, as you know, to this show today. Dame and Kristen are the co-hosts. But for a period of time, I was hosting a 2-hour radio show by myself. Well, today is the solo episode. So if you came for Dame and Kristen, turn that car right back around. Hello, Quincy. Hello, Jake. First-time live watcher. Oh, well, Jake, welcome to the program. I even have a spooky background today because of this. Yeah, everyone, Dame and Kristen are both out. I tried a couple guest co-hosts, including Jeremiah, who always gives me trouble for moving too fast. I said, fine. Got his number. I was like, do you have time? And he didn't, ironically, have time for us. Good morning, Jen. Hey, J.O. Andy, hello. So here's what we're going to do today. Probably not an hour episode, if I'm being frank. And since it's Halloween, I've dressed as Frank. I'm going to talk about midlife crisis. Now, the question in your mind is Pete having a midlife crisis? I will let you vote at the end of the episode. I think more than anything, I'm not just using this word because it's spooky season. The hope for today is that we stop demonizing the concept of a midlife crisis. I think it's one of the most normal, real realities, a real reality. That's why you tune into this show, for the grammar and the word choice. I just think a midlife crisis is to be expected. It is theoretically unavoidable. Good day, Tom Ricks. You guys want a fun little story? All right, I'll give you a fun little story. So I'm in Atlanta this week for a conference at Intuit MailChimp. All right, so MailChimp, the email newsletter company, is owned by Intuit, who owns TurboTax. So I'm at their new headquarters in Atlanta this week, and it was definitely the nicest HQ I've ever been to. I mean, state of the art, is built, I believe, in the last year, hundreds of millions of dollars. This is ridiculous. Hello, Kristen. And across the street, there's an incredible hotel. I encourage you to look it up. It is called the Fourth Hotel, but it's Forth, Fourth Hotel. And it is this boutique hotel. It's really nice and high-end. I'm at this conference, so the people at the conference were nice enough to pay for my travel and accommodations. So these are not choices I made. These choices were made for me. So I check in on Monday evening. Very nice hotel. Give me my room assignment. I go up the elevator. I walk into my room, and my friends, they had somehow given your boy the suite, the suite, I'll call it the presidential suite. So I walk in, and it's insane. So much so that the entire back wall, the windows of, if you will, of my bedroom, my hotel room, are all glass that leads out into a deck overlooking Atlanta with a giant wood fireplace and outdoor furniture and living room. So it is insane. I can't even explain it. And it was just the luck of it all. The next morning, I'm getting ready to go to the conference, and in walks Malcolm Gladwell, famed author. Malcolm Gladwell, between he and I, we've sold millions of copies of books. He's more responsible for getting into the millions than I am. Let's just say that. And you get the sense that suite was actually meant for him. And somehow, some way, your boy ended up with it. Anyway, life shines on you every once in a while. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the show. Solo show, which means I'm in charge of everything. I'm in charge of the news, the bomb, and keeping you all entertained. Hello, Jen. Do we already say hello to you? I did. Well, hello again. All right, everybody. We ready to do this? Vegas next week. Vegas recommendations, anybody? I'm not a Vegas person. I'm staying near the airport in a hotel that I'm not going to share. But anyway, any recommendations? What should I do? Let me know in the chat. All right, let's do this. Let's start the show. Midlife crisis in 3, 2, 1. This week on the Pete the Planner Show, we answer your money questions. Here's how the show works. You email us, askpete@petetheplanner.com. That's askpete@petetheplanner.com. And we talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. This week, we're talking about what we need to talk about. And I'm just going to call it's sort of dual topics today, but same idea. We can call it the financial reality of being 50 years old, or we can call it a look inside of a midlife crisis. Here's the premise. We're going to go through the financial realities of the average 50-year-old who's lived a pretty conventional life. I am yet to be 50. I look much older than 50, yet oddly still not 50. But I will say what I'm going to share with you today hits home with me as we're going to talk about why ages 47 to 53, more specifically, are so complicated. Why do people have a renaissance? Why do people have a rediscovery? Why do people have a midlife crisis? So that's what we're tackling today. We're going to do it in 3 segments. Of course, the last segment of the show is always biggest waste of money of the week in the news. My normal 2 co-hosts are not here this week, so it is a solo, all solo Peter for you, I think no one calls it. All right, so let's get started. Here's what I'll do. I'll give you a rundown of all the things we're going to talk about on the episode, and then we'll get into it. Okay, first, home ownership and the reality of your home at age 50. Not that the home is 50 years old. You know what I mean? Everybody calm down. Number 2, your kids aren't kids anymore. Number 3, the parents who once helped you are now counting on you. We could do an entire episode on that, but we would need Kleenex. Number 4, the career plateau and the realities of unemployment and reemployment and longer unemployment. Also, the midlife balance sheet. I'll just run through what the expenses of someone in their 50s looks like, which begins to explain the difficulty. The time crunch, the true 168 hours a week and all the obligations you have within those. The emotional math of it all. The idea that the quiet dream still lingers in you of what you maybe wanted to accomplish, but you have not. And so those are the things we're going to tackle today, but we're going to start at a place people usually don't start with when it comes to a midlife crisis, and that's your home. All right. So I would argue in most cases, the biggest financial mistakes people make, other than not prioritizing saving for the future, are the decisions that they make around your home. It's the biggest purchase you'll ever make. It's the most amount of interest you'll ever paid over the longest period of time. And so what you'll find is that there's a lot of rooms for mistakes, and they hurt you. So let's start with the reality of anyone who is, let's say, been in their home for 10 or 15 years. Because usually when you're 50-ish, in a lot of cases, you've been in that home for 10 or 15 years. I know that's really anecdotal and not evidence-based, but I think it's a fair assessment. I've been in my home since 2007. So what's that, 18 years? So yeah, kind of right there. Number 1, your property taxes over that period of time when you made that decision have essentially doubled, okay? So 10, 15 years ago, you made a decision about the mortgage and the mortgage payment and your ability to handle it. And within that moment, you also had a set level of property taxes and insurance. And I'm starting off with saying, well, the property taxes have doubled for you. Number two, your insurance premiums are climbing faster than your salary. Depending on where you live in this country, your premiums may be untenable, right? There are pockets of our country where getting homeowners insurance is not necessarily guaranteed. It's a very difficult thing to do. And then the big one, your maintenance fund, which you should have been funding this entire time, isn't just a nice to have. It is a requirement to remain solvent. All the big issues start, all the mechanicals, as they call them, the HVAC, your washer and dryer have probably turned over a couple times. Your kitchen appliances certainly have. And then you get into things like roofs. I always wonder, should the plural of roof be roofs, like hooves? No one knows. A new roof, unless you are blessed by the gods of hail, which I believe God is the god of hail in general, it can cause a massive financial issue. So we're going to start there. Why is your financial life difficult at 50? Because based on how long you've likely been in your home, you are at the height of maintenance issues. And also, you are at the height of having the prudence to fix it. When you're in your 30s and 40s, and definitely your 20s, if you happen to be in homeownership, little things will pop up and you don't have the wisdom to actually invest in the fix. You say things like, we'll figure it out later, or it's not that bad. You don't have the context or experience to understand it. Once you get around 50 years old and you got one little stain showing on your ceiling, knowing that there's a roof leak, you don't mess around because you know how these things can go. So that, number one, off the bat, home ownership, believe it or not, leads to the topic of the week, which is the midlife crisis. All right, on to the kids. Gosh, they're fun sometimes. The teen years are so ridiculously expensive. You know, you think when they're real little and they're in daycare that is the height of your financial responsibility. In fact, I talked to some of my coworkers about their daycare obligations, and I am shocked at how much higher they are than those expenses were when my kids were that age. I think it was a long time ago, our daycare style obligations for our kids sort of peaked out around $1,300 a month, if I remember correctly. And it is not unusual for people to be north of $2,400 a month for daycare obligations, again, depending on how many kids they have. However, when you're 50, it's unlikely you have daycare expenses. And if you do, good for you. But it's more likely that as your teens prepare to go adults and find out new stuff and you choose to spend money on that stuff, whether it be clubs or sports or just various interests, it gets expensive real fast. And I would also note just the nature of living with older kids, which are young, smaller adults, is expensive in terms of food and travel and all the things that you can no longer get away with because they get kids pricing. So that is to say, when your home is getting more expensive, when you're around 50 years old, this is the same time your kids are right near the peak of how expensive they can be. And it persists for depending on how old your kids are, for about a 6-year period, which includes the teen years, the college years, possibly 2 in college years, depending on how many kids you have. And then again, finally, what happens after that? I told you at the end of the show today, I'd let you consider, is Pete himself in a midlife crisis? I don't know, but I can tell you every topic we're going to talk about today about the financial realities of someone who's middle-aged, which adds a lot of stress and anxiety, they're all hitting home. We're too deep, and I'm already salinating from my tear ducts. I don't know if that's the proper verb. All right, so those are 2. That's where we started. So this entire episode is dedicated to why are people vilified for a midlife crisis? Why do we make fun of people going through a midlife crisis when you get done with our show today, you're like, of course the person's freaking out. It's an unbearable amount of stuff all happening at once that all happens to be expensive. So if I want to grow a mustache and drive a Corvette and wear a gold chain and start working out again, that is my prerogative. I'm only doing one of those things. So coming up after the break, the rest of the reasons why being 50 is a lot harder than you think, right here on the Pete the Planner Show. I'm Pete the Planner. This portion of the program is brought to you by Herculean Meal Prep. Picture this. I was in Atlanta this week, and I went to have the buffet lunch that they provided for us at a very nice office building. Of course, I'm already upset because I eat Herculean Meal Prep every day. I know what the carbs are. I know what the protein is. I know what the fat grams are, and I know the calorie count in general, and even the sodium. Lo and behold, I walk up to the buffet and it is fried chicken, mac and cheese, mashed potatoes, and peach cobbler. I was panicking. Why? Because I just want Herculean Meal Prep. It is the easiest way for me to have discipline. You know, I don't often quote Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson once said, if you don't have discipline, you don't have anything. I don't need that. I got Herculean Meal Prep. So if you want some discipline in the way you eat and spend time on meals every day, go to HerculeanMealPrep.com. That's it's HerculeanMealPrep.com. They come frozen. They go ship them to you, or you can go pick them up in Indianapolis locations. But they'll ship them to you no matter where you are. That's HerculeanMealPrep.com. All right, everybody. So some comments during the segment there. What's my Halloween costume? Cheryl asked. That's a great question. I'm not really, I look like Gru, right? I kind of look like Gru, but I'm going to a high school football game tonight. My daughter's a cheerleader, and that's what we're doing. I could have dressed up as a Herculean meal. That's absolutely right, Andy. What are you guys going for Halloween this year? My kids don't dress up anymore. Again, my daughter's got a thing tonight. My son's just going to a middle school party. That's uncomfortable. We all know the middle school party aspect of things. All right. So, I do look, Quincy, it's a good point. I could dress as a thumb because my head literally looks like a underside of a thumb. Thanks for reminding me, pal. All right, let's get back to the show. It's going to be a shorter podcast today. It's a solo episode. And while, yes, I am used to talking for an hour nonstop and the things like webinars and whatever, got a big day. So I'm just I'm going to pace myself. Yeah, Cheryl's past the edge of dressing up too. Yeah, I just don't want to dress up. Like at this point, if I dress up in like a suit, people think I'm heading to my own funeral. So I don't dress up anymore for Halloween in general. All right, back to the show in 3, 2, 1. Back on the Pete the Planner Show. Boy, if you're looking for some uplifting content today, keep looking. Here's what we're talking about. We're talking about the concept of a midlife crisis. Not necessarily the psychological elements, although I'm sure we'll touch on it. More of like, why do they happen? Logistically, why is it that in midlife is everything so hard that in many people it forces a reset? And let's speak specifically here. Things like divorce or completely different stances on health or religion or lifestyle. Just a full reset. Control-Alt-Delete. Let's reboot this sucker and see what happens. It is not an uncommon thing to do. I am of that age. So today we are exploring it. The first two things we talked about, at least through a person's financial lens, is when you are at middle age, your home is involuntarily expensive. This is what's interesting. Early when you first become a homeowner, maybe in your 30s or early 40s, most of your expenses are voluntary in nature. Maintenance, while voluntary, because you don't have to do maintenance, you have the prudence and wisdom of someone in their early 50s, and so you are likely to do the maintenance, yet I will just call it involuntary, and it's expensive. Number two thing we talked about, if you happen to have kids at normal childbearing age, then that means those kids are now no longer cute. They smell and they eat a lot, and that is expensive. And they may be involved in activities that are expensive. I'll also note this before we move on to the next item, something I didn't talk about in the first segment. Just like you could ignore the maintenance needs of your home, you can just as easily choose to ignore the financial obligations which are arriving on a daily basis from your kids in the form of, oh yeah, I want them to go to college. We're going to need to somehow pay for college. We being a collective between me and them, we have no plan. We don't know what that landscape looks like. And so we're probably going to make suboptimal decisions. We're going to get them into a school. We're going to have them matriculate to campus. We're going to start to pay for the first semester, not knowing how the final payment gets made. You know, when I was down in Atlanta earlier this week, I was at a conference where we're trying to address financial wellness and higher ed, okay, for students. That was the nature of my time down there. And one of the data points that a group called Trellis out of Texas brought to the table was when, you got two students here, okay? One has a single threaded strategy for funding their college education, and the other student has 5 or 6 ways in which the education is paid for. So number one might be all loans, or number one might be the parents saved for it. And number two is the parents save for it, the kids get some loans, you get some scholarship, the parents get some loans, the kid works. Okay, so those are the two examples we're using. 1 thread, 5 threads. 5 threads, believe it or not, although it is diverse in the funding sources, leads to a lower level of success of navigating and staying enrolled in graduating. That might be obvious to you, but when we went through that and it said basically the people that just tape together how they're going to get through college are the ones that never make it through college, it addresses the point I just made that where this gets expensive with kids is if you choose not to plan and you don't have the wisdom to plan. All right, now off to number 3 reason why being 50 years old is wildly expensive and stressful and may lead to a midlife crisis. Oh boy, let's tread lightly here. The parents who once helped you are now dependent on you. It is a beautiful, beautiful circle of life moment. Once as you were Simba and your father was lifting you over the Serengeti to show the other lions the newest member of the pride. Before you know it, you're the one lifting them up. And there's a lot going on there. There's the financial aspects of it, of helping them if they misstep. It is not terribly unusual for people to misstep in retirement, including your parents. And as long as their retirement goes on, there's always the risk of a misstep. I'll also note, no matter how much money they have, there's also that they are the number one target for scammers and fraud. I was helping an extended family member this week who was the victim of some online fraud. Nearly every member of my adult family has at least been targeted for these things. And you take the burden on of that as the person who's 50 years old that's helping them navigate that, right? There is a lot there. They've done nothing wrong, but it is a burden to you, a burden you gladly take on, but it is a burden nonetheless. So then you get to a couple other elements of that. You get I'm going to try to keep you out of getting defrauded. I'm going to help you financially if it needs be. I'm going to have concerns about your health. And then I'm also potentially have to go to medical appointments with you. It is a lot to deal with. Meanwhile, by the time you're 50, you're also dealing with your own mortality. You're starting to understand that when you get out of bed, you can pull a muscle, right? And so when you're watching your parents who are 25, 30 years down the road of that process, while you're just coming to terms with your own mortality and aging, it is psychologically taxing. I do find it beautiful. I do find that it is life, but I also find it absolutely exhausting. And I can say to you that that's not a judgment. That's not someone did something wrong, so then you're exhausted. It's like, if you're lucky and your parents are living and your kids are growing and they're thinking about college, if you're lucky, you get to experience the pain of being sandwiched between both of those generations. I would say, as we look at the causes of a midlife crisis, that mortality, look in the mirror of your parents, is about as tough as it gets. Let's move on to one that is equally as uncomfortable to talk about. Age discrimination in the workplace is 100% real. Oftentimes, it is unintended, but it happens. You look at a resume, and your resume tells the story of skills that were relevant decades ago as opposed to relevant skills now. You kind of tell on yourself. And so the reality is, if you ever find yourself on the other side of unemployment, the reemployment process, especially in a fast-moving economy where tens of thousands of jobs this week have been eliminated because of AI, finding yourself unemployed when you're in your 50s is wildly stressful. And while a lot of these other elements speak to the mortality you face, this speaks to the purpose of you and the work that you've put in your entire career. Again, I don't say this judgmentally, I say it observationally. I say it if a person is this situation and they choose a massive reset button to try to help them through it, I understand. I think one of my points I want to make today on the show about midlife crises is that why do we should joke, by the way, we should joke about everything. Everything should be something you can laugh about here and there. But we should not vilify people who are going through it in their early 50s, because it's a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. A midlife crisis should in some way be embraced. So it's with that, we'll come back after the break. We'll hit the last few elements of why is it so hard to be 50 in America today. I'm Pete the Planner, and this is the Pete the Planner Show. There's a lot of talking, y'all. It's a lot of talking. Dame's not here for he and I to make predictions about what's going to happen with the government shutdown. But I do have to talk about the government shutdown briefly with you. I'm going to share a thought. Do what you like with it. I shared this thought with my team here at Your Moneyline yesterday. Do what you like with it. It is quite possible that at midnight tonight, the SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans end. That is to say, I believe on average, somewhere between $170 and $180 a month, maybe a week, or maybe a month, are made available to people of low income who need food assistance. Well, that ends. That ends theoretically tonight. There are some court battles. I believe upwards of 20 states have taken the presidential administration to court to make sure that we can fund the SNAP program, because the shutdown would suggest that you couldn't otherwise fund it. So if this bothers you, do something about it. I know, at least in central Indiana, a great way to help with this is to donate to a place like Gleaner's Food Bank. And where it's nice for you to get rid of your pinto beans that have been sitting in your pantry for 3 years, the better move is to let them leverage their expertise by just sending them money. If you send them $1, they can stretch that into 6 meals. So if you send them $100, they can turn that into 600 meals. So, a little bit of a soapbox for you today. But if you care about people who are facing food insecurity, read the headlines, get mad, and then do something if you want. All right. Gosh, there's a lot of me today. I look, like you, I'm sick of me already. I often look at my wife and I'm like, gosh, how sick of me are you? And she always has a good answer for it. And it's pretty sick of. Okay. All right, let's jump back into it. Fun topic, midlife crises. Boy, spooky season. 3, 2, 1. Back on the Pete the Planner show. Today, we're exploring midlife crisis. Why do people, when they're in their late 40s, early 50s, why do they make massive changes? Some healthy, some unhealthy. You pick up new vices, you get divorced, you find new relationships, you go to a tanning bed, you get a gold rope chain, you start bench pressing, you take pictures of yourself in the mirror at the gym, you join a dating website. I've done none of these things other than go to the gym. But I'll note, it's like people find themselves like on a road trip. They left their house years ago, headed towards a destination. They take a breath, they look up, and they're nowhere near the destination they set out for. You know what I mean? So that's what a midlife crisis is. So early in the show, we were trying to define what are some of the financial elements that lead to the complexity of a midlife crisis. The first being your home is at its most expensive period. If you bought the home in the last 10 to 15 years specifically, your kids who you thought were expensive when they were daycare are somehow now more expensive. And if you want to think about risk, the risk of them becoming more expensive and intrusive is only increasing over the next couple of years. Late elementary, early middle school are the cheapest times to be a parent. Pre-elementary and late middle school to high school will break you. Number 3, as we noted, the beauty of life. Your parents are aging. They may need financial assistance. You are their knight in shining armor against every fraudster that is trying to scam them out of their well-earned money. It is heartbreaking to watch people target your parents and loved ones just because they're elderly and trusting and they don't understand modern technology. It's wildly upsetting. Number 4, we just got into are the career plateaus. Your raises start to get a little bit smaller. Bonuses are a little less predictable. You might be managing younger, hungrier colleagues that, again, make you uncomfortable and remind you of your mortality. It's a good time to take a pause here for a second and just really talk about a phrase that you don't hear as much as you used to. But when I was a kid, it was like a big deal. It was when someone goes over the hill when they're 40. You know that macabre moment where you put like black balloons in someone's cubicle because they turned 40? That doesn't really happen anymore. But what did over the hill meant? It meant you're on the downhill. You climbed the mountain to halfway point of your life, and the rest is downhill, meaning half your life is lived and the clock is ticking. Mortality ain't no joke. And as you face it, late 40s, early 50s, it's lovely in the sense that you get to reprioritize what matters to you. But it is also heart-wrenching. It is wildly heart-wrenching. Next up on the logistics of why midlife can be so expensive is just the midlife balance sheet. So I'm just going to list common expenses of someone who's in their late 40s, early 50s, and how different this is and how much pressure it puts on an income. Mortgage, property taxes, and insurance. Property taxes and insurance consistently going up as you're trying to get that mortgage paid off in the next few years. Your groceries, just like everyone else, you are impacted by the inflation of grocery prices. And if you've got those older kids in the house, they eat like monsters. And depending on how busy your life is with their activities, you could find yourself often eating on the road. Next up, utilities and internet. If you've got 4 people in your house, that are all functioning members of society, they probably all have technological devices that attach them to the internet. They are all served consumer ads that try to part them with their money. That is expensive. On to transportation. Not only do you have to deal with your own transportation, but theoretically, you begin to try to concern yourself with the transportation of your young adults and also the insurance to fund teen drivers, and also the dynamics of transportation of your aging parents. Health insurance gets interesting. All those tests you never thought you'd make it to. Once you're this age, you should have this test every year. Yeah, guess what? You're here now. Those are the tests that you got to have. And so you end up spending a little bit more on healthcare you did in previous times. Your kids' activities, the money you're saving for college, those sorts of things are a major line item in your budget. Support for your parents. If you're regularly sending money their way or helping with this or that, that is a line item. At this point, in terms of retirement savings, you're trying to catch up if you're behind. The odd part about the retirement system in America is that in a qualified account, there's something called a catch-up provision that allows you to put more money away in a tax-sensitive way than you were when you're 49 years old or younger. And if you aren't on track, you've got to catch up. So in some cases, that's $500 more a month that you're able to put away, if not more. And so that starts to stretch your budget. And then finally, as we mentioned with your home, the miscellaneous repairs and other life expenses. Then you get to a point when you're looking at things like long-term care coverage. If this seems overwhelming, if it seems like I'm complaining, I'm not complaining, but it is overwhelming. It's wildly overwhelming. What's really strange is, as someone who has studied money and personal finance for a quarter century, I knew this was coming. I knew it for 10 years. I've been talking about 47 to 53 as the hardest years of a person's financial life. They are unmistakably the hardest years of life. I knew it was coming, and now I'm in it, and I can't believe how relatively unprepared I am. It's shocking. It really is shocking, and it just sort of happens. There are signs, but it just sort of happens. The next element of the logistics of aging and middle age is the simple time crunch. You have 168 hours a week that when you were a young professional or whatever, you could delegate that time between your sleep, your social life, maybe your kids, and it felt comfortable. It felt busy. But now the stakes are a little bit higher. You're trying to raise good human adults. You're trying to care for your parents because they cared for you for nearly 20 years in most cases. You're trying to care for your own health, so maybe you don't repeat some of the health challenges that your parents had. You find yourself creating full new hobbies as some level of renaissance of, I need something for me. I think one of the takeaways I'd love for you to gather from the show today is the importance of something for me. I don't mean me, I mean you. The importance of having something that isn't for anybody else. And it's not negatively selfish, it's appropriately selfish that it is your time. It is you reading, it is you hiking, it is you lifting weights, it is you sewing, it is you whatever. And ideally healthy. It is you drinking. It is you smoking. We try to stay away from those things. We can, as much as makes sense. And then the two final elements to why a midlife crisis is so real and so expensive is the emotional math of being behind. All the things we've talked about today are so daunting. It's not unusual for people to just punt. Just to punt and just say, figure it out later. Well, when the clock's ticking and you find yourself unemployed in your 50s and you can't get reemployed, and then you can't sustain yourself without dipping into your emergency fund, and then you start pulling out of your retirement fund, things start to get really hairy and really scary. And so the emotional side of this can't be left to chance. And then finally, the quiet dreams of, what you should have done to make it challenging as well. So if you're going through this, you're not alone, and you need to take time to sort through it. Coming up after the break, the news. I'm Pete the Planner. Heavy episode. Do you remember the show Blossom with Mayim Bialik, I believe her name was? Always remember they would always tackle like really heavy episodes. And on this very special Blossom, and like Joey Lawrence would be like, whoa. That was my teens. Before that, Different Strokes. Remember that show from the 80s? They always had very special episodes, but theirs were like really intense. I can't even talk about them because I get uncomfortable. I learned about terrible things from Different Strokes. Thanks, Gary Coleman. May he rest in peace. I think he passed away. It's always uncomfortable when you have to guess. All right. You guys want to see a fun trick? It's me doing Blom by myself and the news by myself. Oh boy. Danza says, who's a dope? This lady. I was watching last week's show as if it was today's show. Danza, that is called middle age. It's okay. I've done the same. Actually, last night, we're cleaning up for dinner. I turn on a streaming service and I start watching an episode of a show I like. And about 7 minutes, and my wife's not really paying attention because she doesn't like the show. About 7 minutes in, I go, oh, I've already watched this episode. And she goes, it took you 7 minutes? Yeah, it did take me 7 minutes. It's all right, Danza. It is harsh, but it's okay. It's okay. All right, let's see if I can somehow, some way execute on Blom and news by myself. Oh my gosh. Here we go. You guys, who has confidence that this is going to go smoothly? Me neither. Okay. Cold opens are bland. Yeah, fair. Okay, here we go. I am trying to find what I'm trying to share. Okay, here we go. Shows you. There we go. 3, 2, 1. This week's biggest waste of money of the week right here on the Pete the Planner Show is Incredible Edibles Chocolate Spectacular. Our Incredible Edibles Chocolate Spectacular will create a big impression and a chocolate dipped fruit frenzy at your next special occasion. This arrangement is freshly crafted by our fruit experts, which oddly has a registered trademark. I'm calling a timeout here. Do I still have the sound effects here?
Timeout.
Incredible Edibles or Edible Arrangements, whatever this place was, Edible Arrangements was able to trademark fruit experts. Does anyone else have a massive problem with this? So like, let's say I know a lot about plantains and I fancy myself a fruit expert, which I don't, and I'm not. I could have a trademark infringement situation or copyright infringement because Edible Arrangements has squatted on fruit experts. Anyway, it's fantastically fresh and perfectly presented. It stands over 3 feet tall and serves over 200 people, including our most loved chocolate dipped fruit.
Timeout.
Also trademarked. You can't say the word dipped fruit without having a trademark claim by Edible Arrangements? Come on. Anyway, how much do we believe this 3-foot bushel of fruit? I also want you to note, this is going to be sitting out at a party. It said it feeds 200 people. How many people are going to come and breathe on this thing and rub their dirty knuckles into it, trying to grab a piece of cantaloupe shaped like a petunia? This is a terrible idea. And I'm frustrated at Edible Arrangements. We will not be taking their sponsorship dollars. And even if I would, it wouldn't be enough to pay for this thing, which is $1,999.99. I appreciate any thoughtful gift that anyone sends me. Please don't ever send me anything from there. I don't like cantaloupe. And they all slimy. Everything's slimy. When you get it from there, it's slimy. Not an endorsement. Oh boy. All right. What's in the news this week? Oh, that's me. Well, Peter, U.S.-China's trade truce, tariffs, soybeans, and rare earths. Our first tale takes us to a summit in Busan, where Donald Trump and Xi Jinping shook hands and trimmed tariffs. Yes, trimmed in the midst of a trade war. There's been less war lately and more strategic pause. The U.S. agreed to cut some tariffs on Chinese imports from about 57% down to 47% in exchange for China promising to resume significant U.S. soybean purchases and keep rare earth exports flowing. In other words, U.S. farmers get a little breathing room, global supply chains get a foot off the brake, and the tech industrial complex, especially the rare earth metals folks, get a brief sigh of relief. Here's my opinion on this, in case you're wondering. Nothing is fundamentally changed from when the trade war started. We said the building's on fire. The building was on fire. We put out the fire, and then we said, hey, guess what, everyone? I did light the building on fire, but I also put out the fire. So please give me credit for putting out the fire. Nothing has changed. So that doesn't feel lovely. Meanwhile, the government's still shut down. Consumer spending is up with some strings attached. Here's your second story. American consumers' spending remains surprisingly resilient, even as noise rises about a softening job market and inflation still hovering. Never mind that nearly 1 million Americans who work for the federal government, which when you hear that number, you might think it's a lot. It is a lot. They're not putting money into the economy right now. Card spending data shows household credit and debit card usage rose about 2% year over year in September, the highest since December of 2024. But there's a but. There's always a but. The growth is largely being driven by higher income households, meaning lower income wallets aren't bouncing back as strongly. Again, you don't listen to this show for my predictions. In fact, sometimes you turn them off because of my predictions. But I'm having a hard time seeing how the holiday spending season goes. I'm going to give you two scenarios of how I think it goes. I think it goes awful if the shutdown, the government shutdown, has not been opened. If the government opens back up, here's what's going to happen. This is the second scenario. All these folks are going to get back pay, and they're going to have a sense of relief, and it's going to feel like stimulus. It's not. They're net. They're zero. They are net zero. Like they were owed a bunch of money. They got a bunch of money. They're able to pay their obligations, but it's going to feel like a windfall. And if that happens in the next 4 weeks, consumer spending is going to go bananas in December. Companies that sell in the holiday season will make massive, massive profits in Q4 if the shutdown ends within the next 4 weeks. If it stretches into the year, which I believe it to be, I'll say this. We're going to have one of the worst holiday spending seasons in modern history. Story number 3, the tech giants are still raking in revenue, but investors are blinking at the price tags. Meta, also formerly Facebook, reported solid sales growth, but also flagged massive expense and capital expenditure hikes as it continues to double down on AI ambitions, and their shares dropped more than 10%. Likewise, Microsoft disclosed record AI infrastructure spend, about $35 billion in a quarter. I also saw that Alphabet, which is formerly Google, they had $100 billion revenue quarter. I want to take a pause and I want you to think about that for a second. A company made $100 billion in a quarter. And then earlier in the week, NVIDIA, which is always fun to say and even more fun to spell, became the first company worth $5 trillion. So what we're seeing is that the tech investments continue to be wild, and the rest of the economy is just sort of hanging on. I mentioned it earlier in the show, but out of one side of the mouth is coming the earnings from these tech companies, and out of the other side of their mouth are massive layoff announcements. UPS, while not a tech company, clearly is investing in tech as they laid off tens of thousands of workers this week. Amazon announced at least 14,000 workers being laid off this week, with reports of another 16,000 or so on the way. And so I hate to say it, but it's that time of year. You know it's this time of year. It always happens between now and December 31st. It is officially layoff season. So what a fun, uplifting show. I will not be solo next week. Dame may be back. I may have a guest host. Dame is not on suspension. He's got other work duties here today. And so I was like, you know what? I asked a couple folks to co-host. Didn't work out. So it's just me today. It's good being with you. The topic of the day was an inside look at a midlife crisis. If you missed any part of the show and you'd like to hear it, just go to wherever you get your podcasts and just search Pete the Planner. It's the Pete the Planner Show. And I think we called this one The Truth About a Midlife Crisis. It's a goofy picture, image of me on the front, so you know you're there. You can also watch it. If you happen to be one of the increasing number of people who love to watch podcasts, go ahead and watch me stare into a camera for an hour at Pete the Planner's YouTube page. That's youtube.com/Pete the Planner. Well, I'm all talked out. This is fun. I'm going to go be quiet for the next several hours. So thanks for listening. Sending you good vibes, because good vibes are all that's in the budget. I'm Pete the Planner, and this is the Pete the Planner Show. Ooh. Boy, oh boy. Good times. Hey, everybody. If you know someone who's got it going, things are going rough for them because they're in their middle age, as opposed to whispering to your friends like, oh, I think they're going through a midlife crisis, maybe talk to them like, hey, it seems you got a lot going on. Let them get it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Andy, thank you for telling me that I did it. Of course, what it is, no one knows. It could be you just gave the worst performance in the history of the show. But I'm not fishing for compliments. I know it was amazing. Anyway, everyone, I won't be alone next week. I will have friends. Stay getting money.
Off the Record with Indiana's 250 most influential business and community leaders is a podcast that peels back the curtain on Indiana's most respected leaders, one episode at a time. Go beyond the headlines and hear the stories of grit and innovation that shape these leaders. If you want to know who's driving our state forward, this is a must listen. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at ibjpodcast.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.